KBTC, a viewer-supported community service of Bates Technical College.
From KBTC Public Television Studios in Tacoma, Washington. Welcome to the Steve on the Street podcast, a closer look behind the headlines as public policy and current affairs impact the real lives of real people.
Hello, and welcome to the Steve on the Street podcast, produced by KBTC Public Television's Public Affairs program, Northwest Now. I'm your host for the Steve on the Street podcast, reporter and photojournalist Steve Kickens. Today's episode of Steve on the Street podcast covers America's birthday. The United States of America turns 250 years old in 2026. To celebrate, PBS premiered a new 12-hour-long, 6-episode epic documentary titled The American Revolution, directed by David Schmidt, Sarah Botstein, and Ken Burns.
To believe in America is to believe in possibility. Possibility worth fighting for.
The possibility of a different kind of world. America is predicated on an idea.
Everything that we believe in comes out of the revolution. Our ideas of liberty, equality. It's the defining event of our history.
The American Revolutionary Movement served as a model around the world.
These are not English liberties. These are transcendent liberties. These are liberties that all individuals have by the nature of being human.
The American Revolution changed the world.
The program is available to view streaming right now for free. Find out more information at kbtc.org. At first blush, it might be hard to imagine there's any connection to the American Revolution with the Pacific Northwest, but history proves otherwise. Famous American writer Washington Irving, the 19th century author of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Rip Van Winkle, also wrote the 1836 book titled Astoria, Enterprise Beyond the Rocky Mountains. That book describes the Astor Expedition, which was attempting to establish a permanent American-controlled commercial operation in the Pacific coast. And the book regales the stories of those who followed in the footsteps of Lewis and Clark. And one of those stories includes just a couple paragraphs about a man named William Cannon. Cannon fought against the British in the American Revolution, and he joined the Astor Expedition, and his experience surviving a brush with a grizzly is detailed in Irving's book. It was once required reading for young students, and so while Cannon's brush with the bear is short, it is part of a body of work that helped fuel an interest in pioneer westward expansion. William Cannon was born in 1755 in Pittsburgh and took part in both the Battle of Kings Mountain and Battle of Cowpens. He settled in the Willamette Valley and took part in efforts to establish the Provisional Government of Oregon. Cannon passed away in 1854. Up next on the podcast, learn more about how Cannon's legacy bridges our present into the past from our coverage on Northwest Now. On a country highway in Oregon's Marion County, you'll find horses grazing along the roadside. Fewer than 500 call this small town of St. Paul home. It's about halfway between Portland and Salem in the Willamette Valley. St. Paul is famous for its summertime rodeo and the final resting place for one of America's original patriots.
This is the only known patriot that's buried in the Pacific Northwest.
David Witter says the Oregon Sons of the American Revolution annually leaves a wreath at William Cannon's headstone inside the St. Paul Pioneer Cemetery to honor Cannon's service and highlight connection to community.
They were instrumental in forcing Cornwallis to return up north. It's the Over Mountain men that were involved with that are the same kind of people that were the fur traders that came to the West Coast.
Witter says researchers believe Cannon fought for America's independence in South Carolina in the 1780s before joining an expedition to establish Fort Astoria in 1811. History shows Cannon then moved westward to work for the Hudson's Bay Company at Fort Vancouver, where his tradecraft is recreated by volunteers like Balthazar Puig.
Who would have recognized this place? He's the Forrest Gump of his time. He managed to go through every major event of his lifetime being unnoticed. And I think there's some humility there that it just speaks volumes.
Researchers say Cannon settled in French Prairie near Champoeg, where he joined a majority among pioneers voting to establish the Provisional Government of Oregon in the early 1840s. That vote later visualized in this 1923 Theodore Gagot painting titled The Inception of the Birth of Oregon. Near center frame, standing next to fellow pioneer Joseph Meek, viewers peer over the shoulder of the nearly 90-year-old Cannon, his long white hair and white beard showing his age, as if Cannon's long and storied past leads us to a moment that offers a vision towards a future for the American Pacific Northwest that is all but inevitable.
Well, it's fulfilling. It tells you who you are and what your family went through in order for you to be where you are. And that's important.
In Marion County, Oregon, Steve Kiggins, Northwest Now. St. Paul and Marion County in Oregon are absolutely stunning communities south of Portland. If you can, you should really make the effort to check them out and see for yourself where the Willamette River flows through farmland communities that cradled the birth of Oregon State. Up next on the Steve on the Street podcast, listen to an extended interview with David Witter from the Oregon Sons of American Revolution of the organization's efforts to learn more about William Cannon. Dave, this was important enough for you to meet with me on a Sunday. It was important enough for you to dress in regalia.
Yeah.
Why is that so important to you?
It's because we try to represent the way the colonists were in the 1780s. And we believe in trying to communicate to particularly our children that are coming along about the principles of founding this country and the patriotism that the patriots had to demonstrate in order for us to become a free and independent country.
So really it sounds what you're describing to me as a way to impart respect.
Yes.
On not only Cannon, but
all the patriots. The goal of the SAR is to educate and to honor our patriots. We are all descendants of somebody who served or supported the revolution in the 1780s. So we believe that it's our duty to honor them and to educate future generations about why the revolution came about and the founding principles for the country.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was almost 50 years old before I learned anything about this man's connection.
Yes.
And I grew up in Southwest Washington. I grew up here. The connection seems so distant, both in terms of like separation between geography and time.
Yes, there were very few Revolutionary War patriots that made it to the West Coast. There were some that probably got to California during the gold rush, but they would have been very, very old. But a lot of the patriots moved from the colonies to that next tier of states, just beyond the Appalachians. And there are many monuments to battles and to the patriots themselves, but there are very few that came to the West Coast. William Cannon arrived here in 1812. He was recruited by the Astor family in order to establish an outpost in Astoria. So this was the second expedition, or the first expedition that followed Lewis and Clark. And so it was an arduous journey for that party to get out here. Many of them didn't make it, but he came and he stayed. And that, I think, is a bit unusual as well. So he was a fur trapper, he was a blacksmith, he was a millwright, he built grist mills and sawmills. He built the first overshoot water wheel in Vancouver. William Cannon moved to this area of French Prairie, and he then settled here. That's where he died in 1854. So he was not only a patriot, but he was also an early Oregon pioneer that had a role, along with many other people, in Oregon becoming a state.
I was speaking yesterday with someone else, another historian or another fan of history, so to speak, and the way he described William Cannon almost like Forrest Gump. Maybe not that he was aloof, but he happened to be part of really significant events
Yes, and William Cannon frequently described to the people he met out here that he was in the Battle of Cowpens and the Battle of Kings Mountain, which were part of the Southern Campaign. And they were instrumental in forcing Cornwallis to return up north. It's the Over Mountain men that were involved with that are the same kind of people that were the fur traders that came to the West Coast. And so it doesn't seem too unusual with that background that he came here, but then that he settled and stayed, that I think is unusual. So he also went to fur trapping in the southern part of Oregon and came back. So he had a lot of experiences here. When some of the debates began in the 1830s about the government or petitioning the U.S., he was involved in those discussions, and people pointed him out as the old man, the patriot of the Revolution. So that's partly why we know a bit about him. There's an awful lot we don't know about him that we're still trying to discover. And a lot of the research was done when this headstone was placed here in 2003 in preparation for that. There was an earlier stone that was here in 1991 that the Sons of the American Revolution were instrumental in getting both of these placed here. So we come here every year and place a wreath on his grave in December as part of the National Wreaths Across America program. And we always save a wreath to come here. The wreath that's here now was placed here on November 14th because the President General of the Sons of the American Revolution was here for a conference, and we thought that this is the only known patriot that's buried in the Pacific Northwest. And so he felt it was an honor to lay this wreath here and indicate the respect we all have for this kind of pioneer and patriot.
It seems in just a number of years we've learned it went from this knowledge that we didn't know if he had children. He was described as being a widower, and now we know he has children that emigrated, that moved to Canada. What are some of the things? I guess it's kind of a weird way to ask. What are some of the gaps you're trying to fill in with his history?
Well, one of the controversies has been his headstone says that he was in the 4th Pennsylvania Regiment. The 4th Pennsylvania Regiment was not at Cowpens or Kings Mountain. And so there's a question about could he have been at both places? Well, if he had finished his service in the regiment, he could have been there. But we don't yet know that. We know that there are a number of other William Cannons that served in the Revolution, so now some of those records are much more available, and we're trying to trace them down to rule out the ones that can't be this William Cannon. But we also know that there was a birth record of a son of his that was kept in the ledger that was at Fort Vancouver. And it was the only ledger of births that were recorded. They didn't have 2 books, they only had 1 book. So births down here or wherever they happened were recorded there. And one of the genealogists we've worked with, who's part of the St. Paul Mission Historical Society, has done a lot of research and traced down the generations. So we know there are some living descendants there in Canada. We haven't made an effort to get in touch with them yet, but at some point we probably will do that. So there's and we've also discovered there are other records from the Asker expedition that he came out here with that are in libraries on the East Coast. And so we're now beginning to look at some of those records. We're trying to, he was enlisted in some of the records in Mackinac, Michigan. But there are conflicting records about, or information about whether that was right or perhaps he enlisted in St. Louis. But we're trying to sort that out with the scant records that exist. It's kind of a fascinating research topic, One of our new members, Dan Doherty, has been working with Connie Lenzen from the Historical Society, and they've documented substantially more information than we knew even 6 months ago.
Why is drilling down these details so important for Sons of the American Revolution?
Well, I'm a descendant of a patriot, and I have to be able to document that. So both the Sons of the American Revolution and the Daughters of the American Revolution would be interested in being able to determine if some of William Cannon's descendants are eligible for membership. I mean, that's one aspect, but being able to prove that that he served, and better to document and address some of these inconsistencies, that's what we do. That's part of the genealogy and the history. Sorting out the history is what this is all about. And we want to be sure he's recognized for his service, and that if his descendants would like to know about that, we're happy to provide more information based on what we're learning.
I guess the question then comes to, how can we know who we are and where we're going if we don't know who we've been and where we were?
Yes. And one of my jobs in the SAR has been to work with applicants to demonstrate their heritage. And a lot of times people just have a glimmer that they may have an ancestor. I had a family history book that said my patriot, just one line that said he served in the Revolution. So I tried to prove it, and I was successful in doing that. And now we spend time helping other people do the same thing. A lot of people don't know what their heritage is. And a big part of what we're trying to do is to help them understand their family history and the role that the members of their family had in some of the conflicts in the early history of America.
Now, even though the American Revolution was fought thousands of miles away, those battles have direct ties to us here in the Pacific Northwest, through men like Cannon and countless other pioneers and indigenous peoples who have and continue shaping communities and cultures in our present day. That'll do it for this episode of the Steve on the Street podcast. Thanks again to Balthasar Puig and David Witter, who shared their time on the broadcast and podcast. And of course, thank you. You can be anywhere, but here you are with me, spending the effort and time to join me on the Steve on the Street podcast. Your continued support just by listening, I am grateful you choose to be here with me. Thank you. Northwest Now covers the issues and stories, the people and places that reflect and define who we are and where we call home. Join our broadcast each Friday at 7:30 p.m. on KBTC Public Television. Once more, I'm reporter and photojournalist Steve Kiggins, host of Steve on the Street podcast. Until next time, cheers.